For 40 years, Margaret built her farm from nothing, a young widow with 2 sons and no money, who turned bare soil into a thriving $4 million empire. But the day her eldest son, Henry, handed her a $15,000 check and told her to leave and never come back, everything shattered. He had sold her farm behind her back, forging her signature and stealing the legacy she had worked a lifetime to build. What Henry didn't know was that Margaret had already discovered his betrayal, and with the help of her lawyer Sarah and her younger son Matthew, she had set a trap. At what was supposed to be her farewell dinner, Margaret arrived calm, elegant, and fully armed with proof. In front of stunned diners, Sarah revealed photos, recordings, and legal documents, exposing Henry's fraud, his fake buyer, and even his offshore accounts. The empire he thought he had stolen crumbled in minutes. The police were already watching. His accounts were frozen. His fake company, a ghost. But instead of destroying him, Margaret gave Henry one final chance, a year of redemption. He would work on the farm he tried to steal, earning nothing but food and a roof, under her strict supervision. If he failed, she would take him to court. What followed was a year that changed them both. The arrogant businessman became a man who woke at 5 a.m. to milk cows, repair fences, and plant coffee under the scorching sun. His hands bled, his pride broke, but his heart began to heal. Through sweat, humility, and discipline, Henry slowly rebuilt what he had lost. Not the money, but his mother's trust. By the end of that year, he had repaid $800,000 and transformed from a thief into a man of integrity. Margaret, once betrayed and heartbroken, saw before her not the greedy son who had destroyed her trust, but a humble partner who had earned back his place, not through inheritance but through honest work. She made him her junior partner, still under legal supervision, but with a real chance to prove himself. And for the first time in years, their family, Margaret, Henry, and Matthew, sat at the same table, whole again. That night, as Margaret listened to the familiar sounds of the farm, crickets, wind, cattle, and her son's footsteps in his small cabin, she smiled. Because she knew that true strength isn't measured by what you build, but by what you're willing to defend. Henry had lost $4 million, but he had found something far more valuable. His soul, his purpose, and his way back home. Go far away from here, Mom. Far, far away. Henry's words echoed in my ears like a death sentence. He had just handed me a check for $15,000 after secretly selling my $4 million farm behind my back. My own son, the person I trusted most in this world, was throwing me out of my own home as if I were an intruder. But what he didn't know was that I had already discovered his plans a week earlier, and had taken steps that would leave him speechless. $1,000. I asked with a smile that he mistook for resignation. That's all I'm worth to you after 40 years of building this place. Henry shrugged with an icy indifference that pierced straight through my heart. Mom, you're too old to manage such a big property. I sold the farm for $4 million. I invested the money in a business that will earn us double the profit. This is your share, so you can live comfortably somewhere else. He showed me papers with a forged signature, supposedly mine. What Henry didn't know was that Matthew had come to see me the week before, crying and trembling with anger. Mom, I overheard Henry talking to a lawyer. They're planning to forge your signature and sell the farm. He says he already has a buyer and that you're too senile to notice. My younger son had risked his relationship with his brother to save me from this betrayal, and thanks to him, I had been able to prepare for this moment. For 40 years I had built that farm with my bare hands. I arrived there as a young widow with 2 small children and barely a dollar to my name. I worked 18 hours a day. My hands were covered in calluses, my back bent under the weight of coffee sacks, but I never gave up. Every tree I planted, every fence I built, every animal I raised carried my sweat and my blood. That land wasn't just property. It was my soul materialized in $4 million of honest labor. Henry had always been different from Matthew. From a young age, he asked how much money we made, how much the farm was worth, when it would be his. While I woke up before dawn to milk the cows, he slept in. While I negotiated with international buyers, he partied with the money I gave him. I paid for his college, his car, his wedding, his failed businesses, always believing that one day he would appreciate my sacrifices. But all he saw was an old woman standing between him and his inheritance. "Mom, you're 67, he said as he tucked the forged documents into his briefcase. "It's time to stop being stubborn and admit you can't live alone on such a large property anymore. With $15,000, you can rent an apartment in the city and live comfortably for the rest of your life." His tone was condescending, as if he were talking to a spoiled child. "Besides," he added, "the buyer has already paid and I've already invested the money. There's no turning back." I rose slowly from my chair, feeling every fiber of my being fill with a strength I hadn't felt in years. Henry thought he had defeated me, that he had taken away everything I'd fought for. But what he didn't know was that while he was celebrating his brilliant plan that week, I had been busy working with my attorney, Sarah, preparing the greatest surprise of his life. The same determination that had driven me to build a $4 million empire would now serve me to prove that no one, not even my own son, could humiliate me that way. "All right, Henry," I said with a calmness that put him at ease. "I accept your offer. But before I go, I want us to have one last dinner together. As a farewell." He smiled, believing he had finally broken my will. "Of course, Mom. I'll book a table at the most elegant restaurant in the city. You deserve it." What Henry didn't know was that dinner would be the night his entire world collapsed. The photo of the farm rested on the table, 40 years of honest work frozen in a frame. Soon, my son would learn that stealing from a woman who had built an empire with her own hands was not as easy as he thought. That night I couldn't sleep. Henry's words echoed in my head like a painful echo. "Go far away from here, Mom. Very far." I got up several times, walking through the house, touching every piece of furniture, every photograph, every object I had bought with my own hard work. The farm wasn't just my home. It was the physical proof of everything I had achieved against all odds. And now my own son wanted to erase me from history as if I had never existed. At dawn I called Sarah, my trusted lawyer. "Margaret, I need you to come to my office immediately," she said urgently. "I have news about what you told me yesterday." I drove to the city, my heart pounding, knowing that my future depended on what Sarah had discovered. On the way, I remembered how I had met that extraordinary woman 3 years earlier, when Henry began pressuring me to put the farm in his name. Sarah was different from any lawyer I had ever met. She didn't treat me like an ignorant old woman. She treated me like a successful businesswoman who deserved respect. When I told her my suspicions about Henry's intentions, she didn't dismiss them. "Margaret, cases of financial abuse against the elderly are increasing," she told me frankly. "And sadly, many involve close relatives. We need to protect your assets before it's too late." "Sit down, Margaret," Sarah said when I arrived at her office. The seriousness in her face told me the news wasn't good. "I investigated the documents Henry showed you yesterday. The signature is fake, obviously, but he already submitted those papers to the property registry. Officially, according to the system, the farm is no longer yours." It felt like the ground had opened beneath my feet. But Sarah continued, smiling with satisfaction, and her next words gave me hope. "What Henry doesn't know is that last week, when you came to me alarmed by what Matthew told you, we took preventive action." Sarah opened a thick folder full of official documents. "Do you remember signing those papers last Monday? You didn't just transfer the farm into an irrevocable trust. You also established very specific clauses. According to these documents, you are the only lifetime beneficiary of the trust, and only you can make decisions regarding the property. Any attempt at fraudulent sale is automatically void." Tears of relief streamed down my cheeks as Sarah continued. "There's more," she added, smiling. "We also installed hidden security cameras in your home last week. We recorded the entire conversation yesterday when Henry gave you the forged check. We now have full evidence of his criminal intent." She showed me the footage on her computer. Watching my own son speak so coldly about robbing me shattered my heart, but it also filled me with an iron determination. "And what about the money Henry says he invested?" asked. Sarah smiled in a way I had never seen before. "That's Henry's problem, not yours. He sold something that didn't belong to him, to a buyer who will soon find out he can't take possession of the property. When the buyer demands the return of his $4 million, Henry will have to explain where that money went." The poetic justice of the situation made me smile for the first time in days. I returned to the farm feeling like a warrior preparing for battle. That afternoon, Henry called to confirm our farewell dinner. "Mom, I reserved a table at La Delicious for tomorrow at 8. It'll be a very special dinner," he said, with that false sweetness that now made my stomach turn. "Perfect, son," I replied with a smile he couldn't see through the phone. "I also have a surprise for you." That night, I called Matthew to tell him everything. "Mom, I can't believe what Henry is doing," he said, his voice trembling. "I knew he wanted the farm, but I never thought he'd go this far." I explained the plan Sarah and I had prepared. "I want you to come to the restaurant tomorrow, but don't say anything to Henry. I need you to be a witness to everything that's about to happen." Matthew agreed immediately, a mix of nerves and admiration in his voice. The morning of the dinner, I woke up early to get ready. I chose my most elegant red dress, the one I bought when I turned 60 to celebrate 4 decades of successful work. I applied my makeup carefully, styled my hair as if I were going to a party, and put on the pearl earrings my late husband had given me on our 20th anniversary. If Henry wanted a farewell dinner, I would give him one he would never forget. As I got dressed, I remembered all the times Henry had tried to convince me to sell the farm. "Mom, you're too old for all this work," he would say constantly. "You could live comfortably in the city with the money from the sale." What he never understood was that the farm wasn't work to me. It was my identity, my purpose, my connection to life itself. Every sunrise between my trees, every evening feeding my animals, every night listening to the sounds of the countryside reminded me that I had built something beautiful and lasting. At 6 in the evening, Sarah arrived at my house carrying a suitcase full of documents. "Are you ready for this, Margaret?" she asked as we reviewed the plan. "More than ready," I replied with a confidence I hadn't felt in weeks. "Henry thinks he's giving me a farewell dinner, but in reality, it's going to be his wake-up dinner." Sarah laughed heartily. "I love working with you, Margaret. Not many women your age would have the courage to face their own son like this." When I arrived at the restaurant Las Delicias, Henry was already waiting for me at an elegant table by the window. He was dressed in his finest suit, looking as if he were celebrating a victory. "Mom, you look beautiful," he said, helping me to sit down. "I wanted this dinner to be special, because I know it's going to be hard for you to adjust to your new life." The hypocrisy in his voice made my stomach turn, but I kept a serene smile. "Thank you for being so thoughtful, Henry," I said as I spread the napkin on my lap. "I also have something very special prepared for tonight." He smiled, thinking I had finally accepted defeat. What he didn't know was that in the next few minutes, his world would collapse like a house of cards, and the woman he had underestimated for so many years was about to show him what she was really made of. Henry ordered the most expensive wine on the menu, as if he were celebrating the greatest triumph of his life. "Mom, I want to toast to your new chapter," he said as the waiter poured the golden liquid into our glasses. "I know it'll be hard at first, but living in the city will be so much better for you." His smile was so fake it made me want to scream the truth right then and there, but I held back. The show was only beginning. "Of course, son," I replied, raising my glass with calm composure. "To new beginnings." Henry clinked his glass with mine, unaware that he was toasting to his own downfall. As I sipped the wine, I watched every detail of his face, wondering when exactly I had lost the sweet boy he once was, and when he had turned into this cold, calculating man sitting across from me. "Mom, there's something else I need to tell you," Henry said after a few gulps of wine. His tone turned more serious, more businesslike. "The buyer of the farm wants to take possession next week. I need you to pack your personal things and leave before Friday." The coldness in his voice confirmed what I already knew. To him, I was no longer his mother. I was merely an obstacle to be removed. So soon? I asked, feigning surprise. I thought I'd have more time to say goodbye to everything. Henry sighed impatiently, as if my emotions were an inconvenience. Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. I already found a perfect apartment for you downtown. It's fully furnished, has 24-hour security, and it's close to the hospital, in case you ever need medical care. The way he spoke about my future, as if I were a fragile old woman incapable of taking care of herself, filled me with indignation that I had to conceal. While Henry continued describing my so-called new life, I caught sight of Matthew entering the restaurant. He sat discreetly at a table in the back. My younger son looked nervous but determined. We had agreed he would arrive 30 minutes after dinner began, to witness everything that was about to unfold. Seeing his anxious face reminded me why I was doing all this. I wasn't just defending my estate. I was protecting my good son from his brother's manipulations. Henry, there's something I don't understand, I said when he finally stopped talking. If the farm was worth $4 million and you sold it for that amount, where's the rest of the money? You only gave me $15,000. Henry took another sip of wine before answering, as if he needed liquid courage for what he was about to say. Mom, I invested that money in a business that will bring us much greater profits, he explained with the forced patience of someone speaking to a child. I bought shares in a tech company that's about to revolutionize the Latin American market. In 5 years, those $4 million will become $20 million. His enthusiasm was genuine, which only made it more pathetic. My son had sold my entire life for a business dream that was probably as fake as his filial love. And what if that business fails? I asked with feigned innocence. What happens to the money from the farm then? Henry laughed condescendingly. Mom, you don't understand investments. I studied business administration. I have contacts in the financial world. I know what I'm doing. Trust me. The irony of him asking me for trust, after stealing everything I owned, was so absurd that I nearly laughed out loud. The waiter brought our main courses, but I could hardly eat. Every bite tasted like betrayal. Every sip of wine reminded me I was dining with my enemy. Henry, on the other hand, ate heartily, as if celebrating. Mom, I know this is hard for you, he said while cutting his steak, but think of everything you'll gain. No more waking up early to milk cows. No more worrying about harvests. No more dealing with difficult employees. You'll finally get to rest, like you deserve. What Henry didn't understand was that I didn't want to rest. Those early mornings, those worries, those daily challenges, they gave meaning to my life. The farm wasn't a burden to get rid of. It was the engine that kept me alive, active, and with purpose. And what if I don't want to rest? I asked softly. What if I want to keep working my land until the last day of my life? Henry stopped eating and looked at me with a mix of frustration and pity. Mom, you're 67. You're too old for that kind of physical work. You could get hurt, get sick, even die alone in that remote place. His so-called concern sounded so false it made me want to vomit. Besides, he continued, the deal is already done. The papers are signed, the money is invested. There's no going back. The papers are signed, I repeated slowly. What papers, Henry? He took the same documents from his briefcase, the ones he'd shown me the day before. These papers, Mom. Here's your signature authorizing the sale of the farm. He pointed to a page where there was a signature supposedly mine, one I had never written. When did I sign this? I asked, my voice trembling. Henry looked me in the eyes with a coldness that froze my blood. Mom, you signed it a month ago when you came to visit me. Don't you remember? The lie was so blatant that, for a moment, I was speechless. My own son was accusing me of senility to justify his theft. You told me you didn't want the responsibility of running the farm anymore, that you preferred me to handle everything. He continued naturally, as if reciting a well-rehearsed line. Henry, I said, my voice barely recognizable to myself, I never signed those papers. I never told you I wanted to sell the farm. That's not my signature. His expression hardened immediately. Mom, this is exactly what I feared. You're starting to have memory problems. That's why you need to move to the city, where you can get the medical care you need. The manipulation was so brutal I felt a wave of nausea. Memory problems. I repeated in disbelief. You're saying I'm senile. Henry sighed as if it were a conversation he'd had 1,000 times. Mom, it's not your fault. It's part of aging. But that's exactly why I made these decisions for you, to protect you from yourself. The cruelty of his words took my breath away. Not only had he robbed me, now he was trying to convince me that I was insane. At that moment, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was Sarah, my lawyer, who had arrived right on schedule according to our plan. Good evening, Margaret, she said with a warm smile. I hope you don't mind if I join you. Henry looked confused. Who is this lady, Mom? His tone was no longer condescending but genuinely alarmed. He was starting to lose control. Henry, I said with a smile that was finally genuine. This is Sarah, my lawyer. She has something very interesting to tell you about those papers you just showed me. Henry's face went pale as Sarah took a seat beside us. The farewell dinner was about to turn into the confrontation my son had never imagined. His expression changed completely the moment she sat down. His arrogant confidence melted into visible nervousness, like a child caught red-handed doing something wrong. Mom, what's going on here? He asked, his voice trembling despite his effort to sound firm. Why did you bring your lawyer to a family dinner? His eyes darted between Sarah and me, trying to piece together what was happening. Henry, allow me to introduce myself properly, Sarah said with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm Dr. Sarah Ramirez, attorney specializing in property law and protection of elderly clients. Your mother hired me last week, after her younger son warned her about certain plans you had regarding her property. The way she emphasized the word plans made Henry turn even paler. I don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, but the conviction he had shown minutes earlier was gone. Mom simply authorized me to sell the farm because she can't manage it anymore. Everything is perfectly legal. Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documents. Legal. That's very interesting, she said. Then Henry, could you explain why the signature on these documents doesn't match a single authentic one your mother has made in the last 40 years? Henry took the papers she handed him, and I could see his hands trembling as he examined them. This must be a mistake, he stammered. Mom signed those documents voluntarily. I was there when she did. Sarah calmly pulled out another document from her folder. Are you referring to this occasion? She asked, showing him a photograph I had never seen before. In the image, Henry was clearly sitting alone in his office, signing the papers himself. Where did you get that photo? He whispered, his voice barely audible. His face was drained of all color, and beads of sweat began forming on his forehead. Henry, Sarah replied with chilling composure, did you really think you could commit document fraud without leaving a trace? We have security cameras in the building where your office is located. We also have recordings of the phone calls where you discussed this plan with your accomplice. Accomplice? I asked, genuinely surprised. That was news to me. Sarah gave me a brief look before continuing. Javier Montenegro, the supposed buyer of the farm, turns out to be your son's partner in this scam. The plan was for Javier to buy the property at an inflated price. Then Henry would secretly return part of the payment in cash, keeping the remaining $4 million for his own investments. Henry clutched his wine glass like a drowning man grasping a lifeline. That's not true, he murmured, his denial sounding desperate. Javier is a legitimate buyer. He wants the property to develop a tourism project. Sarah smiled in a way that made me proud of having chosen her as my lawyer. Henry, she said, Javier Montenegro doesn't exist. He's a fake identity you created using forged documents. The bank account where the supposed $4 million were deposited is under your name. The restaurant seemed to fade away around us. It felt as if only the three of us existed in that tense, suffocating moment. "Mom," Henry said, turning to me with pleading eyes. "You know me. I would never hurt you. This must be some misunderstanding." For a brief moment, I saw the little boy who used to run into my arms after nightmares, and my motherly heart softened slightly. But then I remembered the $1,000 check, and his command for me to go far away. "Henry," I asked, my voice eerily calm, "is what Sarah says true? Did you really forge my signature to steal my farm?" My eldest son looked me straight in the eyes, and for a second I thought he might tell me the truth. But instead, his face hardened again, and the cold, calculating man I had come to know in recent years returned. "Mom, you don't understand what's happening," Henry said, his arrogance restored. "Yes, maybe I took some liberties with the documents, but it was for your own good. You're no longer mentally capable of making major financial decisions. Someone had to protect the family's assets before you did something foolish." The cruelty of his words hit me like a physical slap. Sarah intervened before I could respond. "Henry, are you aware that you've just confessed to document fraud, financial abuse of an elderly person, and forgery of official records? Because this entire conversation is being recorded." She pointed to a small digital recorder she had discreetly placed on the table. Henry froze, realizing he had fallen into a perfectly orchestrated trap. "Furthermore," Sarah continued relentlessly, "I should inform you that the farm could never have been sold legally. Last week, your mother transferred it into an irrevocable trust. She is the sole lifetime beneficiary, and any subsequent sale is automatically void." Henry stared at me in total shock. What does that mean?" he asked hoarsely. "It means, my dear son," I said, finally regaining my voice, "that not only can you not sell my farm, but now you have a very serious problem. The so-called buyer Javier Montenegro, who, according to Sarah, is actually you, has already received a property that legally cannot be owned. Where are the $4 million you supposedly paid for it?" The realization of his situation hit Henry like a tsunami. I invested that money," he stammered. "It's in stocks, a tech company. I can get it back." Sarah shook her head. "Henry, we investigated that supposed investment. The company Tecnolatino Solutions doesn't exist. It's another shell company you created to hide the money. Where are the real $4 million? Henry collapsed in his chair like a deflated balloon. At that moment, Matthew approached our table. "Sorry to interrupt," he said tensely, "but I think Henry should know that the bank has already frozen all his accounts due to suspicious activity." Henry lifted his gaze toward his younger brother, his face showing absolute defeat. "Matthew, you're involved in this too." His voice sounded like that of a man watching his world crumble. "Involved in protecting our mother from your betrayal," Matthew replied firmly, more resolute than I had ever seen him. "Yes, Henry, I'm very involved. I was the one who told Mom about your plans. I was the one who convinced her to call Sarah. And I was the one who contacted the bank authorities when I discovered your fraudulent transfers." Henry stared at his brother as if seeing him for the first time. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why would you betray me?" Matthew sat beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Henry, I didn't betray you. You betrayed this family the moment you decided to steal from Mom, everything she worked for over 40 years. You betrayed your own mother when you treated her like a senile burden." Tears rolled down Matthew's cheeks. The waiter nervously approached our table, clearly uncomfortable with the thick tension in the air. "Is everything all right here?" he asked cautiously. "Everything is perfectly fine," I said, with a smile that probably looked ferocious. "My family is just having a very necessary conversation about honesty and respect." The waiter quickly retreated, undoubtedly relieved to stay out of our family drama. Henry looked up at me, eyes glistening with tears. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know I made mistakes. But everything I did thinking about the family's future." Sarah and I exchanged a look. After everything that had happened, my eldest son was still trying to manipulate me with excuses and justifications. The transformation of my sweet boy into this selfish, cruel man was complete, and there was no turning back. Henry's tears didn't move me the way he expected. After 40 years, I had learned to tell the difference between genuine remorse and desperate manipulation. "Henry," I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt, "if you had really been thinking about the family's future, you would have spoken to me before making decisions about my life and my property." His sobs grew louder, but I was no longer the kind of mother who melted at the sight of her son's tears. "Mom, please," Henry begged, clutching my hand. "I know I made a mistake, but we can fix this. I can return the money, cancel the investments. We can make everything go back to normal." His desperation was palpable, but it also revealed that he still didn't grasp the magnitude of what he'd done. "Henry," asked Sarah, her tone calm but professional, "where exactly is the money you supposedly invested?" Henry wiped his eyes with his napkin and tried to recover his usual businesslike posture. "The money is in an offshore investment account," he said carefully. "It's a complex process, but I can access it within a few days." Sarah opened another folder from her briefcase. "Henry, are you referring to the Cayman Islands account you opened last week under the name HM Holdings? Because that account is also under investigation for money laundering." Henry's face completely fell apart. How do you know all this?" he muttered, more to himself than to us. "Henry," Sarah said, her voice sharp and precise, "when you decide to steal $4 million from your own mother, you automatically trigger multiple banking alert systems. International transfers of that magnitude, without legitimate commercial justification, are always investigated by financial authorities." Matthew reached out and took Henry's hand, his expression full of genuine sadness. "Brother, how did we get here?" he asked softly. "When did you decide that money was more important than our mother?" Henry looked up at him, torn between resentment and despair. "You don't understand, Matthew," he said bitterly. "You were always the favorite, the one who never had to worry about money. I'm the eldest. I should have inherited the farm automatically." "A favorite son." I repeated the phrase, stunned. "Henry, I treated both of you exactly the same. I gave you the same opportunities, the same education, the same love." Henry let out a bitter laugh that made my chest tighten. "The same love. Please. Matthew always got to do whatever he wanted. He went off to study art, married whoever he wanted, never had to prove anything. I had to study business because you said someone needed to understand finance to help you run the farm." His words hit me like lightning. For the first time, I realized that Henry had been carrying resentment for years, resentment I'd never even noticed. "Henry, I never forced you to study business," I said, shaken. "You told me you wanted to because you were interested in management." He shook his head violently. "I wanted to study music, Mom. I wanted to be a composer. But you needed someone who understood numbers and contracts, so I sacrificed my dreams for the family." The silence that followed his confession was deafening. Matthew looked at me in disbelief, clearly hearing this version of the story for the first time. Sarah observed the scene with calm professionalism, probably used to how deep family wounds surface during confrontations like this. "Henry," I finally said, "if you felt forced to study something you didn't want, why didn't you ever tell me?" "What for?" he replied bitterly. "The farm was always your number one priority. Your plants, your animals, your crops. We were secondary." Matthew figured that out and went off to live his own life. I stayed, waiting for the day you'd finally recognize my sacrifice. His words hurt more than I wanted to admit, because there was a grain of truth in them. "Henry," I admitted softly, "it's true that the farm was very important to me. It was my way of ensuring a future for both of you. But that doesn't justify stealing everything I worked for over 40 years." Henry covered his face with his hands. "I didn't want to steal from you, Mom," he said in a trembling voice. "I just wanted you to finally see me as your partner, your rightful heir. I wanted to prove that I could multiply the value of the farm through smart investments." Sarah leaned forward slightly, her tone gentle but firm. "Henry, Do you realize there are legal ways to express those ambitions? You could have proposed a business plan to your mother. You could have asked to be made a partner in the operation. You could have suggested reinvesting profits into other projects. Henry lifted his gaze, his expression a mix of frustration and exhaustion. I tried, he said, his voice breaking. For years I proposed ideas, ways to expand the business, modernize operations, diversify investments. But Mom always said the farm was fine as it was, that nothing needed to change. And in that moment I realized he was right about that part. I had been overly cautious, too reluctant to embrace change. But that didn't excuse his betrayal. That still didn't give you the right to make unilateral decisions about my property, I said firmly. If you wanted change, you should have insisted. You should have convinced me, not deceived me. Henry nodded slowly, as if he was finally beginning to understand the gravity of his actions. I know, Mom, he whispered. I know, and I hate myself for it. But when I saw the opportunity with Tecnolatino, I thought I could prove my worth without having to ask for your permission. Henry, said Matthew gently, Tecnolatino doesn't exist. Sarah already explained that. So where did you really invest the money? Henry fell silent for several minutes, clearly debating whether to lie again or finally tell the truth. At last he took a deep breath. I invested it in cryptocurrency, he admitted, his voice barely audible. The confession hit like a bomb. Cryptocurrency. I repeated in disbelief. Henry, you gambled $4 million of my money on cryptocurrency, without my knowledge. Sarah leaned forward, her expression sharp with professional interest. Henry, could you be more specific? Sarah asked evenly. What kind of cryptocurrencies? Through which platform? Henry looked like a man who had just confessed to his own financial suicide. I invested in several new cryptocurrencies that promised extraordinary returns, he murmured. Luna Coin, Galaxy Token, a few others I can't even remember the names of. The investment advisor assured me they were once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. Sarah and Matthew exchanged a horrified look. Henry, Matthew said in a trembling voice, those are classic crypto scams. How much money is left? Henry collapsed fully into his chair. According to my last report, about $300,000. The rest vanished when several of the coins crashed last week. The silence that followed was absolute. 4 million reduced to 300,000, in a matter of days. The scale of the loss was so vast my brain refused to process it. 300,000, I repeated slowly. Henry, you lost $3,700,000 in a single week. Henry nodded without lifting his head, like a child who had just shattered the most precious vase in the house. I thought it was just a temporary market correction, he whispered. The advisor told me every investment has initial volatility. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, probably calculating the legal implications of what he had just revealed. Henry, she said, her voice sharpening, do you have the documents for these investments, contracts, receipts, communications with this supposed advisor? Henry fumbled through his briefcase and pulled out several crumpled papers. Here are some documents, but most of the transactions were digital. Sarah examined the pages quickly, her expression growing darker by the second. Henry, these are not legitimate investment records, she said finally. These are intake forms from a crypto pyramid scam. You didn't just lose your mother's money. You were the victim of a massive fraud. Henry's eyes flickered with a fragile spark of hope. So that means I can get the money back. Sarah shook her head sadly. It means the scammers have already disappeared with the funds, and the chances of recovering them are practically zero. Reality settled over us like a heavy fog. Henry hadn't only betrayed my trust and stolen my property. He had irreversibly lost a fortune that represented 40 years of honest work. The poetic justice was brutal. The son who wanted to prove his financial brilliance had fallen for the oldest digital scam in existence. The devastation on Henry's face was complete. He had not only lost his family's respect, he had destroyed the very wealth he had coveted most. Mom, he murmured, barely audible. What am I going to do now? Can't pay you back. My house is mortgaged, my credit cards are maxed out, and now the authorities have frozen my accounts. For the first time that night, I saw real vulnerability instead of calculated manipulation. Henry, I said with a firmness that surprised even me, that's no longer my responsibility. You made these decisions without consulting me, assuming you had the right to control my life and my property. Now you have to face the consequences of your own actions. Sarah nodded approvingly as she organized the papers she had just reviewed. Margaret's right, Henry. You're 42 years old. The choices you made were yours, and so are the consequences. Matthew took his brother's hand with genuine compassion. Henry, I'll help you however I can, he said softly. But first you need to understand that what you did was terribly wrong. Henry gripped Matthew's hand as if it were his last lifeline. Are you going to report me to the police, Mom? He asked, terror flooding his eyes. The question hit me hard because, despite everything, he was still my son. Sarah answered before I could. Henry, technically you've already been reported. The banks automatically flagged and forwarded the suspicious transactions to the financial authorities. Document fraud, forged signatures, and financial abuse of an elder are serious crimes that proceed automatically. Henry went pale as paper. So that means I'm going to prison. It depends on many factors, Sarah explained with her usual professionalism. Your cooperation with the investigation, your willingness to return whatever funds remain, and your mother's decision on whether to pursue additional civil charges. All eyes turned toward me. The hardest decision of my life now rested in my hands. Send my own son to prison, or find another way to let justice run its course. Henry, I want you to listen to me very carefully, I said after several long, tense minutes. What you did didn't just steal money from me. You destroyed the trust one placed in you for 42 years. You treated me as if I were some senile old woman unworthy of respect or consideration. Henry began sobbing again, but this time his grief seemed genuine. Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to impress you. To impress me by stealing from me? I asked, incredulous. To impress me by treating me like an obstacle you had to get rid of? Henry shook his head frantically. No, Mom. I wanted to impress you by multiplying the money, by giving the farm back to you with improvements, to prove I could be the successful son you always wanted. His words revealed a deep distortion of reality that genuinely worried me. Henry, I said softly, I never wanted you to be anyone other than yourself. All I ever wanted was for you to be honest, hardworking, and respectful of others. Financial success was never my priority for either of you. Matthew nodded firmly. Mom always told us the important thing was to be good people, not rich people. Henry looked at his brother as if hearing those words for the first time in his life. Sarah cleared her throat softly to draw our attention back. Margaret, she said carefully, we need to discuss the legal steps that come next. Henry will have to face criminal charges regardless of your decision, but you can influence the civil penalties. I took a moment to process everything. My son had committed serious crimes, lost a fortune, and now his future partly depended on my decision. Sarah, I finally asked, what are my options? You can file a full civil lawsuit seeking total recovery of all damages plus additional penalties, she explained calmly. Or you can negotiate a settlement, one that includes returning the remaining $300,000 and creating a structured repayment plan for the rest, in exchange for not pursuing certain civil charges. Henry looked at me with desperate pleading in his eyes. And if I choose the full lawsuit? Yes. Henry would lose everything he has. His house, his car, any remaining assets, Sarah replied. In addition, punitive damages could leave him in debt for the rest of his life. The severity of both options hit me like a wave. A part of me wanted Henry to pay fully for what he'd done. But another part of me remembered the little boy he once was. Mom, please, Henry begged, tears streaming down his face. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I promise I'll do everything I can to make it right. I'll work day and night, sell everything I own, find a way to pay back every cent I lost. His promises sounded sincere, but I had learned to distrust easy words. Henry, I asked directly, how can I believe your promises after what you've done? How do I know this isn't just another manipulation to escape the consequences of your actions? He wiped his tears and looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen in years. Because now I understand, he said quietly, that I've lost the most important thing I ever had, your respect and your trust. The money can be recovered, maybe. But that might never come back. Matthew spoke softly. Mom, may I suggest something? I nodded, grateful for his calm. What if we give Henry a chance to prove he's serious, but under very strict conditions? Sarah raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What kind of conditions are you thinking, Matthew? Henry immediately returns the remaining $300,000, he said. He sells his house and car to generate more restitution funds. And he works on the farm, unpaid, until he's compensated a significant part of the loss. Everything would be legally supervised, with monthly progress reports to you, Sarah. Henry nodded eagerly, almost desperately. That's interesting, Sarah said, taking notes. But we'd need to include clear consequences if Henry fails to meet any of the terms. We'd also need guarantees that he won't have access to any of Margaret's assets without legal oversight. Henry seemed ready to agree to anything that might save him from total ruin. And what about the family? I asked, reaching the heart of what truly mattered. How do we rebuild the trust you destroyed, Henry? That question weighed more on me than any financial consideration. Henry took several minutes to respond, clearly thinking carefully. Mom, I know I don't deserve another chance, he said finally. But if you let me work on the farm, not as your heir or partner, but as your employee, maybe over the next few years, I can show you that I'm capable of respecting your work and your authority. His humility seemed genuine, but I knew words came easily when someone was desperate. Henry, farm work is hard, I warned him. It means waking up at 5 a.m., working under the sun, getting your hands dirty, doing tasks you've always considered beneath your education. Are you really ready for that? Henry nodded vigorously. Mom, I'll do whatever it takes. I just want to earn back your respect, even if it takes me the rest of my life. Sarah took careful notes while we spoke. If we proceed with a supervised settlement, she said, we'll need very specific terms. Restitution amounts, payment schedules, work conditions, consequences for breach, and a clearly defined probation period. Henry agreed immediately to every condition she listed. There's one more thing, I added, feeling it was time to set the most important boundary. Henry, if you accept this agreement, you will never again question my decisions about the farm or pressure me to make changes I don't want. My property is mine, and my decisions are final. Henry nodded solemnly. I understand completely. Mom, I'll never cross that line again. By now, the restaurant had nearly emptied, leaving only the soft clinking of glasses and distant piano music. The waiter approached discreetly to ask if we needed anything else, clearly hoping we would soon finish. Just a few more minutes, I said kindly. The most important decisions of our lives couldn't be rushed for the sake of a restaurant schedule. Then I made the decision that would change all of our lives forever. Henry, I said firmly, I'm going to give you one chance to redeem yourself, but it will be on my terms under full legal supervision. He looked at me, eyes wide with a mixture of relief and fear, realizing this was likely his last opportunity. Sarah, I continued, prepare a contract including everything we've discussed. Henry will immediately return the remaining $300,000. Sell all his assets to generate additional restitution funds, and work on my farm without pay for 12 months. Sarah nodded, writing quickly. I also want monthly reports of his progress, I added. And if he fails to meet any of the terms, we will proceed immediately with the full civil lawsuit. Henry wiped his tears and looked me straight in the eyes. Mom, I accept every condition, he said, his voice trembling. I promise I'll work harder than I've ever worked in my life. His tone shook, but there was a determination in it I hadn't heard in years. "But you need to understand something, Henry," I said sternly. "This is not a reconciliation. It's a supervised work arrangement. Trust will have to be earned day by day, and it could take years to rebuild what you destroyed in one night." Matthew took his brother's hand, emotion tightening his voice. "Henry, I'm proud of Mom for giving you this chance," he said. "And I hope you value it for what it is." Henry turned to his younger brother, eyes glistening. "Matthew, thank you for protecting Mom when I betrayed her. You're a better man than I am, and I hope I can learn from you during this process." The genuine humility in his voice gave me the first real hope that maybe, just maybe, this family could begin to heal. "Now let's talk specifics," said Sarah, organizing her documents again. "Henry, first thing tomorrow you'll transfer the $300,000 into a restitution account under my administration. Then you'll have 30 days to sell your house, your car, and any other valuable assets." Henry nodded without protest. "Where will I live during this period?" he asked with genuine concern. "At the farm with me," I replied, surprising him. "But not in the main house. There's a small cabin where seasonal workers stay. You'll live there under the same conditions as any employee." Henry swallowed hard. "No special privileges for being your son?" I shook my head firmly. "None. In fact, you'll be under stricter supervision, because you're my son and you betrayed my trust." Sarah continued laying out the legal framework. "Henry, you also need to understand that during this year of probation, you can't make any major financial decisions without oversight. No investments, no loans, no new accounts." Henry accepted every restriction without hesitation. "I understand," he said. "I need to prove I can handle basic responsibilities before anyone trusts me with bigger ones. There's one more thing," I added seriously. "Henry, during this year you're going to learn every single aspect of running the farm. You're going to milk cows," I told him. "You're going to plant coffee, mend fences, clean stables. You're going to understand, physically, what it means to build something with your own hands." Henry nodded vigorously. "Mom, I'm ready for that. I want to truly understand what you've done all these years." Matthew smiled for the first time that night. "Henry, I think this kind of work will change your perspective on a lot of things." Henry looked at his brother curiously. "What do you mean?" Matthew paused before answering. "When you work the land with your own hands, you realize money isn't just numbers in a bank account. Every dollar represents sweat, effort, sacrifice. Maybe that will help you appreciate what Mom built." I continued. "You also need to understand that your relationship with me is going to change fundamentally. You're no longer my son who can ask for favors or expect special treatment. You're my employee, and you'll have to earn every opportunity you're given." Henry nodded solemnly. "I understand, Mom. I know I lost the right to be treated as your son when I betrayed you. I hope I can earn that place again someday." Sarah closed her folder with quiet satisfaction. "Margaret, I believe this agreement is fair but firm," she said. "It gives Henry a real chance at redemption while fully protecting your interests." I looked directly at Henry, gathering every ounce of seriousness I could muster. "Henry, understand this. If you fail this agreement, there will be no third chance. I'll proceed with the full lawsuit and cut all ties with you permanently." "I understand completely, Mom," he replied, his voice trembling but resolute. "This is my last chance to be your son again, and I won't waste it." His words sounded sincere, but I knew that only actions would prove his intentions. "Good," I said. "Then we start tomorrow. Be at the farm at 5 a.m., ready to work." The waiter approached again, clearly eager to close the restaurant. "Excuse me, but we'll need to close in 15 minutes, he said politely. Sarah began packing her documents. "Perfect. I think we've covered everything for tonight. Tomorrow we'll meet at my office to sign the official agreement." Henry nodded nervously, still processing everything he had agreed to. As we stood up from the table, Matthew embraced him, tears in his eyes. "Brother, I'm proud of you for accepting this chance. I know it'll be hard, but I think it's exactly what you need. Henry returned the hug tightly. Matthew, thank you for not abandoning me despite what I did. I need you to help keep me on the right path this year. Henry, I said finally, you must understand one more thing. During these 12 months, you won't just be working to repay the money you lost. You'll be working to rebuild the respect you destroyed, the trust you betrayed, and the family bond you almost ruined forever. Henry looked at me with a humility I hadn't seen since he was a child. Mom, I know I don't deserve this opportunity, he said softly, but I promise I'll do everything I can to be worthy of it. Sarah walked us to the door. Margaret, I'm impressed by your wisdom in handling this. You're giving Henry a chance at redemption, but with full legal protection for yourself. I thanked her sincerely. I couldn't have done this without your expertise. See you tomorrow for the official signing. When we stepped out into the cool night air, it felt as though I'd just emerged from a long and brutal battle. Henry's betrayal had been devastating, but at least now there was a path forward. Henry, I told him before we parted, remember, tomorrow at 5 sharp, you start work like every other employee. Don't be late. Henry nodded solemnly. I won't fail you, Mom. Not this time. Matthew offered to drive me home, but I chose to go alone. I needed time to process the night that had changed everything. On the road back to the farm, I reflected on what had just happened. My son had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable, yet I had proven that a 67-year-old woman could defend herself and set firm boundaries. The future was uncertain, but at least now it was on my terms. When I arrived and saw my land bathed in moonlight, a deep satisfaction filled me. This land was still mine. My 40 years of work were safe. And maybe, just maybe, I would have a chance to regain my lost son. But this time it would be under my rules and my conditions. The woman who had built an empire with her own hands was not going to be defeated. Not by betrayal, not even by her own child. 3 months later, after that night that had changed our lives forever, I woke up, as always, at 4:30 a.m. I no longer needed an alarm. My body had developed its own clock after 4 decades of early mornings on the farm. While I dressed, I heard footsteps in the courtyard. Henry was already awake, getting ready for another day that would begin sharply at 5. The first days had been brutal for him. His hands, once used to holding pens and calculators, were covered in blisters after the first week of physical labor. His back, which had never lifted more than a briefcase, ached from carrying sacks of coffee and heavy tools. But to my surprise, Henry didn't complain once. Every morning he showed up on time, ready to work and to learn. "Good morning, Mom," Henry greeted me as I stepped out of the main house. His appearance had changed drastically over those 3 months. Tanned skin from the sun, calloused hands, muscles shaped by hard work. But more important than his outward transformation was the change in his attitude. There was no arrogance left in his voice, only genuine respect and a humility he was learning day by day. "Good morning, Henry," I replied with the professional neutrality I had maintained these months. It wasn't coldness, just the distance necessary between an employer and her employee. "Today we'll inspect the north section of the coffee plantation," I said. "The plants need pruning and fertilization." Henry nodded and went to fetch the necessary tools without needing to be told. He had learned the routine quickly. As we walked toward the coffee fields, I watched how he interacted with the plants. At first, he treated them like objects to be handled for a task. But gradually, he began to understand that each plant was a living being that required care and attention. "This one looks sick," he said, pointing to a coffee bush with yellowing leaves. He was right. "What do you think might be causing that?" I asked, testing what he'd learned. Henry bent down to examine the plant more closely. "It could be excess water, lack of nutrients, or maybe a pest," he said thoughtfully. His answer showed that he'd been paying attention during the lessons I'd given him about plant care. "Very good," I said. "And what would you do to fix it?" Henry thought for a moment. "First, I'd check the soil drainage to make sure it's not waterlogged. Then I'd inspect the leaves for signs of pests or disease. Finally, I'd adjust the fertilization based on what I find. His methodical response impressed me. He was learning to think like a farmer, not just follow orders. During those 3 months, Sarah had been meticulously monitoring Henry's progress. He had complied with every single term of the agreement. He transferred the remaining $300,000, sold his house and car, and handed over all additional funds he generated. The total recovered so far was about $550,000, just a fraction of what had been lost, but a meaningful beginning. "Mom, can I ask you something personal?" Henry said while we pruned the coffee plants. It was the first time in 3 months he'd dared to start a conversation that wasn't strictly about work. "You can ask," I replied, keeping my attention on the pruning shears. "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me for what I did?" The question hit harder than I expected. I stopped and looked him straight in the eyes. "Henry, forgiveness isn't a reward for good behavior," I said quietly. "It's something built day by day, choice by choice, action by action." Henry nodded solemnly, clearly understanding there were no easy answers. "You're proving that you can be trusted with daily tasks," I continued. "But deep trust, the kind you destroyed, takes years to rebuild." "I understand," Henry said sincerely. "I just wanted you to know that every day I work here, I understand a little more what I destroyed when I betrayed you. This land isn't just money or property. It's your life, your identity, your legacy." His words moved me more than I expected. They reflected a kind of awareness that had been missing for years. "I'm glad you finally understand that," I told him softly. That afternoon, Matthew came to visit as he did every weekend. The dynamic between the brothers had completely changed. Matthew no longer had to protect me from Henry. Now he could relate to him as a brother who was genuinely trying to change. "How do you feel after 3 months of physical work?" Matthew asked as we ate dinner. "Tired but satisfied," Henry answered honestly. "It's strange, but there's something gratifying about seeing the tangible results of your effort at the end of the day." Matthew smiled. "That's exactly what Mom always tried to teach us when we were kids." Henry nodded, a nostalgic smile crossing his face. "You're right. It's a shame it took me this long to understand it." During dinner, Henry told me about his interactions with the other workers on the farm. "At first, they looked at me with suspicion," he admitted. "They knew I was your son, and they probably knew something had happened. But over time, when they saw I was willing to do the same work as them, they started accepting me." I was genuinely glad to hear that Henry was earning respect through action, not title. "There's something I need to discuss with you," I told him after dinner. "Sarah informed me that the legal process is going well. The authorities have located some of the scammers who tricked you with those cryptocurrencies." Henry straightened, interested. "Does that mean we can recover more money?" "Possibly," I said cautiously. "But it also means you'll need to testify against them." Henry didn't hesitate for even a second. "I'll do whatever it takes to help recover the money I lost because of my stupidity." His immediate willingness to cooperate showed me that he was truly committed to making things right. "Good," I said. "Sarah will arrange the meetings with the prosecutors." Henry nodded with quiet determination. That night, after Matthew left and Henry went to his cabin, I sat on the porch, reflecting on the last 3 months. Henry's transformation had been remarkable, but I knew that 3 months were only the beginning. Real deep change takes years to take root. Still, for the first time since that devastating night at the restaurant, I felt something close to hope. Henry was showing discipline, humility, and genuine hard work. More importantly, he was showing respect for my authority, following instructions without arguing or manipulating. Those were the basic foundations upon which, perhaps one day, we could rebuild a family relationship. The next day was Sunday, traditionally a day of rest on the farm, but Henry had developed the habit of using Sundays to study agriculture. Books on coffee cultivation, livestock manuals, articles on modern irrigation techniques. Watching my son voluntarily educate himself about my life's work filled me with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. "Henry," I said when I found him reading under a mango tree, I want to ask you something." He looked up from his book attentively. "What are your plans after this year of probation ends?" Henry closed the book and looked at me seriously. "Mom, if you allow me, I'd like to keep working here on the farm, not as your privileged son, but as an employee who's earned his place." His answer surprised me. "Don't you miss your old life? Your office, your suits, your meetings?" Henry shook his head firmly. "That life was built on empty ambitions and irresponsible choices. This life, though simpler, feels real. It feels honest." His words reflected a maturity I had never seen in him before. "Henry, you still have 9 months left in your probation," I reminded him. "A lot can change in that time." "I know, Mom," he said, nodding. "But I want you to know that with each passing day, I'm more convinced this is the right path for me." The sincerity in his voice made me feel that maybe, just maybe, I had recovered the son I once thought I'd lost forever. That afternoon, as I watched Henry repairing a fence under the golden afternoon sun, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride for the transformation I was witnessing, sorrow for the wounds still healing, and hope for the future we might yet build together. Justice had been served, but more importantly, the possibility of redemption was revealing itself day by day through my son's honest labor. 1 year after the night that changed our lives forever, I woke before dawn with a strange feeling in my chest. Today marked exactly 1 year since Henry's probation began, and for the first time in 12 months, I felt genuinely optimistic about the future of our family. The familiar sound of footsteps in the courtyard confirmed that Henry was already awake, preparing for another day of work, the work that had completely transformed his character. Over those 12 months, Henry had fulfilled every single condition of the agreement without a single lapse. He had worked from sunrise to sunset, learned every aspect of the farm's operations, and demonstrated a dedication I never believed he was capable of. More importantly, Henry had recovered a total of $800,000 through the sale of his properties and his cooperation with the authorities in pursuing the scammers. "Good morning, Mom," Henry greeted me as I stepped out of the house. His physical transformation was remarkable, tanned from the sun, his muscles shaped by labor, his hands rough and calloused after a year of honest work. But his emotional transformation was even more astonishing. The arrogance had vanished completely, replaced by genuine humility and a deep respect for work and for me. "Good morning, Henry," I replied, but this time there was warmth in my voice, warmth that had been absent for months. "Today is a special day." Henry nodded with a nervous smile. "Yes, Mom. It's been exactly 1 year." I could see the anxiety in his eyes, the uncertainty about what I had decided for his future. "I want you to know," I told him sincerely, "you've exceeded every expectation I had." That morning we worked together in the fields as we had hundreds of times over the past year, but this time I watched Henry with new eyes. The gentle way he treated the animals, the meticulous care he gave to pruning the plants, the patience with which he explained agricultural techniques to new workers. This was the man I had hoped he would become for 42 years. By noon, Sarah arrived at the farm for our scheduled meeting. Throughout the year she had monitored Henry's progress monthly, and her reports had always been consistently positive. "Margaret," she said as she looked over the final documents, "in all my years as a family law attorney, I've rarely seen a transformation as complete as Henry's. He has met every single term of the agreement. He's repaid $800,000 of the $4 million lost, worked without pay for 12 months, and shown a genuine change in character and values." Henry sat with us, clearly nervous to hear my final decision about his future on the farm, and in our family. "Henry," I said, meeting his eyes, "a year ago, you betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. You stole my trust, forged my signature, and tried to take everything I had built over 4 decades. Henry lowered his head, visibly ashamed by the reminder of his actions. "But during this year," I continued, "you've proven that you can change. You've worked harder than any employee I've ever had in 40 years. You've learned to respect this land and to understand what it means to build something with your own hands. You've shown humility, dedication, and a genuine commitment to making things right. Emotion filled Henry's face as he listened. "That's why," I said, "I've decided to offer you a permanent position on the farm, not as my automatic heir, but as my junior partner, with a fair salary and the opportunity to participate in operational decisions." Henry looked at me in disbelief, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Really, Mom? You trust me enough for that?" "Henry," I replied honestly, "full trust will take years to rebuild. But you've proven you deserve a chance to keep earning it. However," I added, "there are conditions." Sarah took out a new contract we had prepared. "You'll remain under legal supervision for the next 3 years," she explained, "and any major financial decision will require your mother's explicit approval." Henry accepted every condition without even reading them. "Mom," he said, voice trembling, "just the fact that you're allowing me to stay is more than I deserve." His tears of gratitude moved me deeply. "Henry," I said softly, "everyone deserves a second chance if they're willing to work for it." I reached out my hand, and when he took it, I felt as if I were finally getting my son back. That afternoon we called Matthew to share the news. His joy was immediate and genuine. "Henry, I'm so proud of you," he said. "You've proven that people can change when they truly commit." For the first time in over a year, the three of us embraced. And for the first time since that terrible night, our family felt whole again. During dinner, Henry asked the question I'd been expecting. "Mom, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me completely for what I did?" I thought carefully before answering. "Henry, forgiveness isn't a single event. It's a process. Every day you prove that you've changed, every honest decision you make, every moment of respect you show me, all of that contributes to forgiveness. I don't feel the anger I felt a year ago," I continued. "I don't feel the betrayal as an open wound anymore. What I feel now is hope. Hope that you've truly found your path. Hope that we can build a new, better relationship on the foundation of mutual respect." Henry nodded, tears glistening in his eyes, moved beyond words. That night, as I prepared for bed, I reflected on the most challenging year of my life. My son had betrayed me in the most brutal way, but he had also given me the chance to prove my own strength. I had set firm boundaries, demanded respect, and created the conditions for a true reconciliation built on actions, not empty words. The next day, Henry would officially begin as my junior partner on the farm, with a salary, real responsibilities, and the opportunity to contribute honestly to the success of the operation he had once tried to steal. The poetic justice was perfect. The son who had wanted to inherit the farm without earning it would now have to earn it, day by day, with his honest work. As I drifted off to sleep, I heard the familiar sounds of the farm that had been my home for 4 decades. The crickets singing, the wind whispering through the trees, the distant murmur of cattle. But there was a new sound that brought me peace. Henry's footsteps in his cabin, preparing for another day of honest labor. The woman who had built an empire with her own hands had proven that no one, not even her own son, could defeat her when she was determined to defend what she had built. But, more importantly, she had proven that a mother's love, when combined with firm boundaries and clear consequences, can create the conditions for true redemption. Henry had lost $4 million of my money, but he had found something infinitely more valuable. He had found his soul, his purpose, and his way back home. And I had regained not only my estate, but the hope that my family could heal and grow stronger than before. Sometimes, the most painful betrayals become the most powerful opportunities for growth, forgiveness, and genuine transformation. The farm that had once been the scene of the greatest betrayal of my life would now bear witness to the most beautiful redemption I could ever imagine. And for the first time in a year, I fell asleep with a smile, knowing the future was full of new and hopeful possibilities.